In the old, cobblestone streets of Dublin, nestled within a house of Gothic elegance among Georgian architecture, a young family celebrating Halloween was about to face the nightmare of their lives. I'm Liam, and with my wife Maeve and our two young children, 8-year-old Finn and 6-year-old Isla, we had just moved into this inherited Victorian-style house. The house was located in the old Phibsborough area on the outskirts of the city, and according to rumors, had stood empty for many years. No one wanted to live in it due to the terrible things that had befallen its previous owners. However, we saw these stories merely as the romantic allure of an old house. The children loved Halloween, and the house's large garden was a perfect playground for them. The interior of the house was filled with antique furniture, dusty curtains, and the pervasive scent of old wood. Maeve was eager to decorate the house. She was particularly captivated by an antique doll collection we found in the attic, left behind by the previous owners. Porcelain dolls, rag dolls made from old fabrics, and wooden puppets. All of them stood in a glass display cabinet, their eyes seemingly fixed on us. The children were initially a bit creeped out by these dolls, but Maeve introduced them as the house's old friends, and they quickly grew accustomed to them. Halloween night was approaching, and Maeve, as the new owners of the house, decided to throw a big party. We invited all our friends and neighbors. The children, dressed in their costumes, ran around the house. I was making the final arrangements in the garden, while Maeve was putting the finishing touches inside. In the air, there was not only the crisp autumn breeze, but also a faint melody emanating from the depths of the old house. Like an old children's song, yet also mournful and menacing. The party started, and the house was filled with laughter, music, and voices. The children collected their candies and showed off their costumes. Everything was going well until midnight. When Maeve went upstairs to put the children to bed, she heard a sharp scream from Finn's room. We immediately rushed upstairs. Finn's room was dark, with only moonlight filtering through the window. Finn was sitting in his bed, trembling and crying. The dolls are moving," he whispered. Maeve tried to calm him. "No, darling, it's just a dream." But Finn pointed to the display cabinet. The cabinet door was ajar, and one of the dolls inside, an old porcelain doll, had moved from its spot, its head tilted slightly. It was as if it was watching Finn. I tried to find a logical explanation. Perhaps the wind or the house shook, but a strange shiver ran down my spine. The porcelain doll's eyes seemed too alive to be inanimate. That night we slept in Finn's room. We locked the dolls inside the display cabinet. However, the next morning, when we woke up, the cabinet door was ajar again, and the porcelain doll was sitting on the edge of Isla's bed. Isla was sound asleep, but the doll's smile, it was chilling. Maeve and I looked at each other. This was no joke. Something was wrong. The old stories of the house suddenly seemed much more real. Maeve decided to go to the local library to research the history of the house. I stayed home, trying to keep an eye on the children and the dolls. In the old records at the library, Maeve found a horrifying story about the house. It had belonged to a doll maker named Constance, who lived in the 18th century. Constance was childless and poured all her love into the dolls she made. But one Halloween night, as children began to die due to a plague sweeping the town, Constance performed a dark ritual to revive her dolls and give them life. The ritual involved trapping children's souls within the dolls. However, the ritual went wrong, and the dolls became filled with vengeful, malevolent spirits. The townspeople accused Constance of witchcraft and executed her at Dublin Castle. But her dolls were never found, and according to rumors, every Halloween, Constance's spirit would return to her house, awakening her dolls to seek new souls. Maeve returned home, and what she told us left us in horror. These dolls were not just antique toys. They were the vessels of trapped souls. And on Halloween night, Constance's spirit had awakened them, perhaps targeting our children. That night, the house's atmosphere changed. The old wood creaked louder. The whispers from the walls grew more distinct. Isla stopped playing with her dolls in her room and began constantly staring out the window, murmuring, Finn, meanwhile, started having terrible nightmares, saying the dolls were smiling at him and calling to him in his dreams. Maeve wanted to remove the dolls from the house. She packed them all into a box and locked them in an old shed in the garden. But at midnight, we heard noises coming from the shed. When we went outside, the shed door was ajar and the dolls were gone. Everywhere there were footprints, small, childlike footprints in the mud. The dolls had returned. And now they were roaming inside the house. We started hiding inside the house. In every corner, every shadow, we thought we saw the dolls moving. Maeve one night saw our bedroom door slightly ajar. Through the crack in the door, the porcelain doll's eyes stared at us. There was a terrifying glow in its eyes. Maeve screamed, and I immediately slammed the door shut, but the doll was there. It was in the house. As Liam, I tried to remain rational. This had to be a hallucination, a symptom of stress. But the children's fear, Maeve's trembling hands, and what was happening inside the house, I had no doubts left. This house was cursed, and the dolls, along with Constance's spirit, had returned. We reached out to Dr. Alistair Finch, an old professor who had lived in Dublin. Dr. Finch was an expert in Irish folklore and supernatural phenomena. We told him our story. He initially struggled to believe us, but when he heard the history of the house and Constance's story, he took us seriously. Dr. Finch told us that Constance's ritual could only be reversed on Halloween night at the peak of the moonlight. To reverse the ritual, the dolls needed to be burned, and peace needed to be wished for Constance's spirit. However, this was a risky endeavor, as the spirits would resist. Halloween was approaching again. This time there was no party, only a battle. Dr. Finch arrived at the house, bringing with him old herbs, salts, and a shamanic drum. He blessed every corner of the house, drawing protective symbols. We kept the children in the safest room of the house, under my supervision. Maeve and Dr. Finch, meanwhile, were preparing in the attic to find the dolls and perform the ritual. At midnight, as the moonlight began to stream through the attic window, howls echoed from all over the house. The dolls had begun to scurry around the house. Small footsteps from the corridors, murmurs, laughter. Everything indicated that a nightmare had come alive inside the house. Dr. Finch and Maeve stood in front of the display cabinet in the attic. The cabinet was empty. The dolls were scattered everywhere. The porcelain doll stood on the table, its eyes fixed on them. Dr. Finch began to beat his drum, chanting old prayers. Maeve, with trembling hands, collected the dolls one by one, putting them into a consecrated sack. Just then, the porcelain doll, aniden vitrinden yere atladı. Ayak sesleriyle odaya doğru koşmaya başladı. Gözleri parlıyordu. Ağzından tiz bir çığlık sesi çıkıyordu. Maeve çığlık attı, ben de hemen kapıyı kapattım. Ama bebek oradaydı. Evdeydi. Porselen bebek vitrinin üzerine tırmandı, ardından pencereye doğru koştu. Pencereden dışarı atlayacaktı. But at that moment, "No!" I cried. I grabbed the piece of wood from Maeve's hand and threw it towards the window. The wood hit the doll, and instead of falling out the window, the doll tumbled to the floor. The fallen doll suddenly became motionless. Then a sound of cracking glass was heard. The doll's porcelain face had cracked. From within it, a faint blue light seeped out, and from the light, a small, timid child spirit rose. The child's spirit looked at us, then slowly floated upwards through the attic window towards the sky. It was free. The other dolls also became motionless at the same time. From within each of them, faint blue lights seeped out. Then child spirits rose and floated towards the sky. Each one was freed from the bondage of the curse. Dr. Finch got up. His head was bleeding, but a smile was on his face. "We did it," he said. We set them free, but Constance's spirit was still present. In the middle of the attic, in the air, a woman's silhouette now appeared more distinctly. Her face was old, her eyes burned with rage. This was Constance. "My dolls! My children!" she cried. Her voice was like an agonizing scream. Maeve walked towards Constance. A sorrowful expression was on her face. "They are not your children, Constance. They were trapped souls. Now they are free. You can be free too. Find peace." The rage on Constance's face slowly turned to sorrow. She extended her hand towards Maeve. She wanted to touch, but couldn't. Then her body began to tremble. She dispersed like a wind, and only a whisper remained in the attic. "My children, my children." Silence reigned in the house. Halloween night, the nightmare was over. We went to check on our children. Finn and Isla were sound asleep in their beds. Their eyes were normal, and peaceful expressions were on their faces. The next morning, as the first rays of sunlight filled the house, its atmosphere had changed. The eerie whispers were gone. The old wood still creaked, but now it sounded like the normal noises of an old house. The dolls stood in the display cabinet, but their eyes were lifeless. They were just antique toys. Liam and Maeve continued to live in their house in Dublin. But every Halloween, they remembered what they had experienced that night. And they knew that some old stories are not just legends. They are real, and they continue to seek justice. The cursed dolls were gone. Constance's spirit had found peace. But within the walls of that Victorian house in Phibsborough, what happened on a Halloween night would forever echo. And this would remain one of Dublin's dark secrets.